Hello and welcome to Your Coaching Journey, a podcast for doctors about coaching. Whether you're a coaching doctor, a doctor who is learning to coach, or a doctor who'd like to build coaching into your professional life, then this is the podcast for you. Hello, I'm Tom Dillon, and with me today is my co-host and business partner, Helen Leathers. Hello, Helen. How are you?
Hi, Tom. I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I realise I'm not stumbled over saying your name for a long time now.
No,
I'm doing very well.
Well done.
I don't know what it is about your name.
Oh, it's hard to say. It's hard to say. Today on our podcast, we have some listeners' questions, which we haven't had for a while.
Hurrah! We've not done this for ages, have we?
No.
And it's strange because we do. Obviously, we run our transformational coaching diploma on a regular basis, and we constantly are answering questions that our students have about coaching.
Yes.
So we have lots of opportunity to ask people what questions they have about coaching. But then we forget that we're doing a podcast and we want some questions.
Yeah.
So if anyone out there has any questions about coaching that they would like to be answered on this podcast, do let us know. Just drop us an email or LinkedIn message or something.
And they don't have to be a coach, do they? They could be interested in coaching.
And if you'd like to have a guest appearance on our podcast, record your question, send it in a voice note, and we can play it as a question that we can then answer.
That sounds exciting. So, shall we ask our first question?
Let's ask our first question.
Okay, so this comes from someone who has recently completed our transformational coaching diploma, and they are a doctor and an appraiser and very, very busy, but they love coaching. But they said, look, I'm really busy. Do I need to offer support or something else between coaching sessions for my coachees?
Okay.
Which I think is a really great question.
Well, except that it was a closed question. We've just spent 6 months teaching them to ask open questions. And then
Let me rephrase it.
that.
What support do I need to offer my coachees between sessions?
I think this all comes back to contracting, which was discussed on a recent episode, and what you feel is appropriate and what your coachee feels appropriate, and coming to some agreement and actually having a conversation around that. I think from my perspective, as someone managing the coaching relationship, it's good for you to have your thoughts around what you're prepared to do.
Yes.
And that you're not ambushed by someone saying, oh, well, if you could just email it to me and do lots of work for me in between, that would be lovely. And it would be lovely, but that's not really your job. So obviously, if you are charging for coaching, you're charging for your time of being there with them.
Yes.
And for the benefit they derive from being with you in that space. And anything above and beyond that is something that you're probably not going to be charging for. If someone's expecting you to do things in between the sessions, they're probably not expecting to pay you to do those things.
Yes. So we need to be clear.
It's having some boundaries around, okay, this is what you're paying me for. This is my interaction with you. What are your thoughts?
Well, I absolutely agree with you. I do tend to have a caveat in my contract. That is, if you're doing something that brings up some big emotional stuff. So if between coaching sessions your thinking has continued, which we know that it does, we open up the thinking in the session. If you're struggling with something, reach out. If I need to jump on another call with you, if I need to help you to find the support you need. And I think that that's just some psychological safety around doing the type of work that we do.
Yeah, I think I'll probably take a slightly different approach. Similar, but slightly different. So what I will sometimes do, because quite often I'll contract with people that we're going to have a session maybe once a month, maybe once every 3 weeks. But if at the end of the first session that they've gone to an emotional place and they're kind of struggling a little bit with things, and obviously we're not talking about someone at risk, but just some emotional content that's coming up, I'll say, well, we've got the next session scheduled for 3 weeks. If you'd like to bring that forward, if you feel like you need to interact more quickly than that, then we can bring that forward and have that session. So I still get paid for the interaction I have with them. We just bring it forward a bit.
Yeah, I think that's a really good call. To be honest, it's only ever happened once that someone has reached out and said, oh my goodness, I was just journaling around what came up for me in the coaching space, and I felt really emotional about it, and we did have a quick sort of 15-minute phone conversation just to calm things down. But that's once in 6-7 years.
Yeah, and as you were saying that, I was just thought that I had someone that I actually sent an email, a follow-up email, I think the next day after a session, because the session had ended at a point that she was going, I feel worse about this now, which isn't a great place to leave a coaching session with someone feeling worse. And but it was a process she had to go through. So she absolutely had to go through that to get to the other side. But I felt like I wasn't leaving her in a great place. So I just emailed her the following day saying, recognise that wasn't the best of endings for your session. How are you? Do we need to talk?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a judgment call, isn't it? And
Absolutely.
You will know how things have gone in the coaching session, and we don't have to jump to rescue, but just having an awareness and just having a sense of responsibility to the relationship, I think, and if what feels right for you in the moment. I think the danger comes if you are overly compassionate and want to ease their suffering, because sometimes the suffering is what they have to go through to get to the other side, and sometimes we have to leave them to sit with it for a while, and if they are well resourced, and they will come through it, won't they?
Absolutely. Yes. So think about what you're offering, think about your contracting, and make sure you're clear with your clients what you do and don't.
Yeah, and that is very easy to sit in a contract and say, in between sessions, I won't be doing anything.
Yes.
Or whatever it is you will be doing. It might be that you email to arrange the next appointment, or you ask them to do it, whatever you do. So my supervisor always asks me to send him a Zoom link for the next session.
Right.
Hang on a minute, I'm paying you for this. I'm the client. But I do it, and that's fine.
And that's your agreement, your arrangement.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, hopefully we've cleared that up for our coaching doctor there. Something that came up recently, talking to someone who's training to be a coach, they said, what happens if someone comes back to a session and they haven't done what they said they were going to do? And this has happened a couple of times. So you're getting frustrated with the slow nature of your client's progression, I guess, due to inaction.
So they've agreed to do something, and maybe said they want to do something, but when they come back, they haven't done it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd fine them, £100. No, I wouldn't do that. I made you laugh. So no, I think, again, it comes back to responsibility, doesn't it? They have a responsibility for the actions they take and for the speed with which they are moving forward. That's not our responsibility. Our responsibility is to show up and be present as a coach, and to ask good questions and do some active listening and some really good playing back to generate that new thinking on their part. But what they choose to do with that new thinking is entirely up to them.
Yes.
Now, it may be there are emotional, psychological blockers that are getting in the way of them making... when we did the cycle of experience, the Gestalt cycle of experience, we get to that action part and people might be resistant to taking action. So useful to explore, perhaps, why it's not happening, but they're not doing it for us. They're not doing it to please us. I think sometimes coachees do it to please the coach. Think, I'm seeing Tom tomorrow. I haven't done that thing. I best do it now. So I think there is a little bit of that, but that's not what we expect of coachees.
No.
So I'm not overly concerned if they don't do what they said they were going to do. But it's interesting. I'm curious. I want to know why, if it's something they say they want to do, why it's not happening. So we might explore that in that session.
And I think it's worth going back and listening to our episode on accountability, which we recorded, and how much we can hold someone to account in reality. What
was the episode I just mentioned?
The Gestalt.
The Gestalt. So go back and listen to that one too.
Yeah.
Listen to them all. They're great.
Fabulous. So for the person who asked that question, I hope that helps, and there's some more resources there for you to explore your thinking around that.
Excellent. Do we have more questions?
We do, yes. Now, this is a question that's come up, and it's also a question I often think about because, as you know, I am an assessor with the Association for Coaching,
Oh, yes.
in their
One of
accreditation
your other
process.
roles, yes.
Yes. And one of the elements that frequently comes up in assessing is about feedback on the coaching and assessing the effectiveness of coaching. And we have Dr. Carol, we'll call her, who has asked about how do I know if my coaching is going well? And I think this is a really interesting element because I hesitate to get feedback from people because I don't want the coaching to be about me. It's not about me. And so I don't know, what are your thoughts on feedback and effectiveness of coaching?
I think I'm similar to you in not wanting to turn it around and go, oh, how do you think I did today? Because it isn't about me. I'm there to generate new things on their part. But obviously, if there's something not working for them, we'd quite like to know that. And how do they know it's safe to share that with us if we don't invite it?
Yeah.
So I think there is that element to it that if it might be useful to get some feedback. It's interesting, I was listening to a podcast the other day about feedback, and it's difficult to know how you do it in this situation, but they were suggesting that feedback tends to produce quite a defensive response. So it's not always particularly helpful to get feedback because we tend to, I'm not happy with that. It's not what I did at all. And we go to that defensive place. Whereas if we get advice about what we might do better in the next session or what we might change in the next session to be more effective, that might be really useful.
Oh, that's interesting.
So advice rather than feedback. Because we can't change what's happened. We might learn from our mistakes, but actually thinking about, okay, how could I do something differently next time?
And I guess asking that question of our clients at some point after maybe a couple of sessions, what has worked well in the coaching room, or what has worked not so well.
Yeah. And I kind of worry a little bit that it becomes about us again, and that we're just asking for affirmation that our coaching is great. And I heard on another podcast a coaching demonstration where at the end of it, the coach actually asked the coachee to rate his coaching and said, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is rubbish and 10 is great, how do you think the coaching was? And I gave him a 7. He said, okay, and what would take it? What's one thing I could do differently next time to take it to an 8? It was that sort of solution-focused approach. And the coachee said, well, there was a point where you were going quite quickly through the options, and maybe if you slowed down, that might have helped me. I was finding it quite hard to keep up. And so, okay, so that's great. So I could do that differently. And so he was saying that really helps me in my coaching. Now, that's what worked for that coachee. And if you're working with them again next time, then that might be useful. It might be that your pace is fine. It just didn't work for that coachee.
Yes.
So it's useful to think about, but not necessarily something to act upon because it's just one individual.
Yeah.
But whereas if you've got a pattern of that, I guess by asking for feedback or advice, you could go, okay, I've had a number of people now saying I'm going too quick, so I do need to think about that.
So I wonder if it is best done within the coaching session or in like a follow-up email, just doing a bit of research.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Yeah, there are some, I think there's some AI stuff around that will take your coaching session and review it and look for, I think it's something that's on the way. So you can say how many closed questions did I ask and get feedback independently of the coachee.
Okay.
So that's a different way of going about getting some feedback on your actual coaching. Because the problem we have with coachees is they don't really know what we're supposed to be doing.
Well, that's what I was just going to say. If you ask for someone to give you advice on how you could better coach them, they might say, well, I want your advice,
Yes.
which is, of course...
I keep asking for advice and you don't give me any.
You don't give it to me. So, yes.
They're not best placed.
No. Now, I'm wondering if recording your session with permission and sharing it with your supervisor for feedback might be an option.
Yeah. If you have that relationship with your supervisor, then that's part of their offering, that they will do that. Or you could just team up with another coach and do that as a mutual service for each other. Just
talk
ask them.
through the session.
So we're quite fortunate, I think, in running the program that we do. We're teaching people how to do good coaching, how to best practice.
Yes.
So they're used to looking for what's good in a coaching session and maybe some things that could be improved on. So whenever when we're engaged on our coaching program with coachees, they're giving us feedback on our coaching.
Yes.
quite often they say, yeah, you're brilliant, Tom, well done.
Of course they do.
But they've got the opportunity to go, oh, well, actually, and at the very first time during lockdown, when I first did a co-coaching session online with someone, and so during lockdown, obviously everyone was stuck at home, and I thought, well, what would be a benefit to the coaching world? So I set up a co-coaching group, so anyone could come along, and lots of coaches did come. So it was great. And it really sort of community feel to it. Anyway, so the first coaching session I did, I coached someone else who's quite an experienced coach. And she said, yeah, when you asked that question there, I felt that was quite a leading question. And I immediately had that defensive reaction because I wasn't used to getting feedback. So I had that, well, yeah, no, it was, but only because, and in the end I stopped myself and went, no, you're absolutely right. It was a leading question. Good call. Yeah. So to actually receive that feedback is really helpful from people who know what you're supposed to be doing. If I ask lots of closed questions of a coaching client, they wouldn't know.
No.
They wouldn't go, oh, Tom, you ask a lot of closed questions. So I think actually going to co-coaching groups is a really good idea because you will get feedback from someone who knows what good coaching looks like. And I think obviously doing training programs where you are given feedback on your coaching. And like you say, you might use your supervisor. You might say, my supervisor, his name's Bob. I might say to Bob, can we just have half an hour where I coach you on something? And then you can tell me what you think of my coaching.
Yeah.
Because so Bob was my trainer on my very first coaching course that I did. And so he's been with me for the last 15 years. And he watched me at the end of my first year of training. So I had, I think, 11 days over that time. And maybe not, 9 days. And he did my assessment and he said, yeah, you ask a lot of closed questions. But damn! But he's never seen me coach since then. But he's my supervisor. How does he know what I'm doing in the coaching room? I talk about it.
Yeah.
But he has no idea whether I can coach well or not.
And one of the things that ICF have coach mentors rather than supervisors, and one of the things that they do is they insist on them reviewing your coaching in a recording.
Yeah.
So I think there's some room there, there's some scope there to talk about that with the supervisor or other.
But I do think that idea I just came up with 5 minutes ago of teaming up with another coach, so doing some peer supervision of each other's coaching, is a very cost-effective. Well, I'm doing myself out of supervision work.
You are, yeah, absolutely.
But I think it is a really useful thing. Okay, well, I like them as a person. I trust their judgment on coaching. We've been through the same program. We understand what good looks like. Let's do some peer coaching and just give each other feedback, or record it and then ask for feedback.
Yes, and I think that's probably even more effective because you're with a real client. Yeah. We just need to ensure that we ask permission for that. But
at the same time, if you're with another coach and doing that peer support thing, you can still do a real coaching session.
Absolutely.
And record it and listen back.
Yeah. I just think we might be more hyper aware when we're in that situation with another coach and more cautious and careful to have best practice.
Yes, that's a good point. Yeah. We know we're being judged.
Yeah. Whereas if you took a recording to your peer, your friend, who was also a coach, and said, can you review this for me? I think there would be perhaps...
I think there is a confidentiality issue there, so we have to... And I'm not sure. Most of my coaching is quite deep stuff. I'm not sure that any of my coachees would be happy for me to record and share the recording because they talk about very personal stuff.
So have we talked ourselves around in a circle there?
I think we have, yeah. But no, we've got some ideas. So maybe supervisor we could coach our supervisor, see what they think, or we could coach a peer, see what they think. We could perhaps record a session and say, this is just for my use. I just want to review it for myself. I want to play it back, listen to it, see how I'm doing. And if we could use a transcription service, get it transcribed, read the transcription, and then you can see, well, am I asking leading questions? Am I playing back? Am I doing all those good things that I know it's useful to do? How am I doing?
Yes, I listened back to one of my recent coaching sessions that I'd recorded with permission, and it's a really interesting listening to that and picking out what am I doing well, because we're allowed to say that too, and what could I do better. So hopefully
Yeah,
that
and
helps.
interestingly, Carl Rogers, who's obviously the founder of the person-centered movement and person-centered therapist, used to record his therapy sessions so that he could play back and see what was happening in the coaching room and see what worked, what didn't work, and was very reflective on his therapy to see where no one had ever done that. So the whole idea of research around therapy didn't really exist because there was no evidence of anything.
Yeah.
But he'd got this backlog of recorded sessions that he could see some patterns emerging in.
Interesting. I think reflection on our coaching is really important to
Yeah, and I've certainly
improve.
noticed a change in my coaching with running the programs and doing the co-coaching sessions that I've done, setting those groups up, having regular feedback on my coaching. I've been coaching for 15 years. So it's not like I'm just starting out and need the feedback because I'm still learning, but I'm not at the beginning. But actually I find it really interesting to get other people's perspective and to perhaps notice the patterns that I've started to fall into. And I do tend to challenge myself a little bit. I am quite self-aware, so I will notice. And there was a point where I noticed I was using scaling quite a bit in my coaching, and I did challenge myself to go, okay, are you using this because it's helpful or just you've got into the habit of using it? So I did challenge myself, and I did decide that no, it's a really useful thing to do, and yeah, good for me to be doing it. So, but it's good to ask yourself those questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we've got one more question. It's a very quick one, which I'm going to ask and answer. This comes up a lot.
I'll sit and watch.
It comes up a lot. What insurance do I need as a coach? So if you are out there qualified as a coach, yes, you will need some insurance.
What type of insurance will you need?
You will need professional indemnity insurance. And what often happens when you go to an insurer, they will also give you, added into that package with no extra charge, public liability insurance. So professional indemnity insures your practice as a coach. The doctors out there listening will be pleased to know it is not as expensive as doctors' insurance. It's considerably cheaper. And the public liability insures you for if you're out and about, if you're at an event, that kind of thing, for anything that could potentially go wrong if you trip someone up or trip over a lead or something like that. So that's what you need. It is very reasonable. You're talking sort of £80, £100 a year. We've used Baylands as a broker before now, but also the Association for Coaching do have a list on their website of insurers, and some of those will give you a discount for being a member of the Association for Coaching as well. So that's something to consider.
Wonderful. Well done.
That's everything.
Well done for answering your own question. I had nothing to do with that one. So
Fabulous. Thank you for your questions. Keep them coming, and we will do our best to answer them.
It was really enjoyable actually doing another question and answer. We
Yeah.
haven't done one for quite a while.
No.
Normally we just come with some thoughts, so it's good to be questioned about coaching.
Absolutely. So next time on our podcast, we're going to have an interview with another coaching doctor.
We are, yes.
Do we know who that is yet?
No, not yet.
Okay. We'll let you know.
Yeah.
And yes.
Subscribe so you never miss an episode. And go back and listen to some old episodes that are still very interesting to listen to.
They're quite
and
good.
They are. And we will see you next time. So bye-bye for now.
Bye for now.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.